Not yet. No, no. Now you can go. Go ahead, Father.
Good day, everyone. And welcome to the show here with Father Martin Padovani. And I finished off last week with the section on forgiveness, and now I'm going to talk about that reconciliation, that we can have a much better understanding of what that is. We can forgive people, and then we have to work on the reconciliation with them. And sometimes we can forgive someone, but we don't have any reconciliation. What has happened? Because of the offense of one person towards another is so grave that the people forgive the one who's offended them so seriously, but they can't go back to reconciling with them. And sometimes we mix up forgiveness with the reconciliation. We can forgive, but it doesn't always mean reconciliation. This is what happens in a divorce situation, and the that because of the disorder in the particular marriage and the amount of disagreement and also mistreatment of one another and constant arguing and disagreeing, it comes to a point where there is no more healthy marriage. And so people wanted to divorce. And the divorce uh, doesn't uh, come automatically. You know, they have to go to a lawyer and all of that. And eventually the divorce is there between the couple. But the person has to work on dealing with forgiveness of the person that hurt them, the former spouse, because what happens there is that people don't ever let go of that hurt. And really, even though they're divorced and either party or both remarry, as long as they're holding on to that anger and hate with the former spouse, they're really legally divorced, but psychologically they're not. How many second marriages do we have where people remarried and they remarry with tremendous hate and disagreement and ongoing conflict with the former spouse? That's a big mistake, to remarry with all that anger and disagreement and unsettledness. So I'm always working with the person who's been divorced. You need to forgive your former spouse for your own sake, or else you're still married to the other person, and you can remarry, and you bring in a lot of that baggage. And then what happens is the second marriage has its problems then. So when I work with these people, I always, as we're working on healing from the brokenness and the pain and the hurt of the first marriage, I'm always working with them also to forgive. And remember what I said when I talked about forgiveness back a few sessions ago. At least if we can forgive the former spouse intellectually, I forgive that horrible person that made my life so bad, at least intellectually. it may take a long time before they can do it fully emotionally and arrive at spiritual forgiveness where they can let go. But at least having intellectual forgiveness, that is when you can really say you're going to begin to heal from the former marriage. This is why we have 75, 70% of second marriages that fail. Why do they fail? They bring in their anger and resentment towards a former spouse. They haven't healed it. It's a poison inside of them. But they need, before they move on in a new relationship, they need to get that first relationship, no matter how bad it was, they have to get it where they can come to let go of that. That's why people, when they remarry after a divorce of maybe only 6 months, there's a lot of danger there. And that's why these marriages have a lot of trouble. There's a lot of failures in second marriages. There doesn't have to be. I've worked with people who have divorced and they also hope maybe to remarry, or sometimes they just have so much pain they're not even thinking about that. But whatever the situation is, I always tell them along the way, at this point, the most important thing for you is not thinking about remarriage or getting involved with somebody seriously at this time. You need to work on your healing from the first marriage because you need to forgive that other spouse, the former spouse, and for not for his or her sake, but for your own sake, because you can't carry that kind of baggage into a second marriage. And furthermore, you can't carry that baggage into life because that baggage there is not only a poison to your system, but what does it do to the kids that they know you hate their father or mother? And these are the complications. This is why we have these breakdown of families, which are just getting out of control in our country today. Because the biggest problems that the politicians never put at the top of their list is the breakdown in the family. And that's what's happening in our country. This is why we have a lot of disaster and the craziness that is going on. And how many of those people that are attacking the president or the Democrats, attacking the Republicans and vice versa, there's a lot of unresolved anger that has gone through their life. And the biggest one is the latest tragedy of the divorce. People can succeed in second marriages. I've had a lot of second marriages that were really wonderful and they made it. They got beyond all their faults and mistakes they made in the first marriage and are able to move on. Now, that's a wonderful thing. You can't move on if you're dragging baggage, hurt, and anger from that first marriage. It not only has poisoned you, but it poisons the children, if there are any children in that former marriage. So let's think seriously about this. And that's why a lot of people will say to me, "Oh, I don't want to go marriage again. It's too painful. It's too much hurt. I don't want to get married again." Well, I say maybe you will. Maybe you will consider it. But the problem is right now, you have to deal with the healing that you need to be able to get that hate and anger outside of yourself and be able to move on. And even if you don't remarry, the point is you need to have peace. And a lot of people, after they've really wrestled with that breakdown of the first marriage and come to a certain peace, a lot of them don't even want to remarry because they're at peace with themselves. They have a good job. They're doing well with the kids. And they just feel that finding another spouse is not always easy, because finding another spouse that has been married and divorced, you have to make sure that that person understands why they failed in the first marriage. What did they learn in the from the breakup of the first marriage? Above all, what did they learn about their mistakes? And thirdly, are they ready to remarry at this point? Those are three important aspects that have to be fulfilled. And this is why there's such disaster in these areas. And so a lot of the women who would continue on with counseling, uh, they very often had some dates, and they think they want to remarry. I say, bring in the other person, and that other person, I will cross-examine and have them talk about their second marriage, their first marriage. How did they fail? How did the marriage fail? Do they understand how they failed? Are they healing? And are they ready to move on? These are such important questions. That's why the marriages in our country are just in turmoil. We need a lot of education. One of the things I did in premarital counseling for people that I married, and I married quite a few in the middle of my career, and I always gave them the 2 sessions that the diocese required uh, before they got married. I gave them 3 or 4 sometimes because I wanted to make sure that they knew about their own family background, each other's family background, and were able to understand one another's areas that are negative from the backgrounds they came, and what are the positive things. That was a big help to many of them. I have had less divorces in the people I married and witnessed that marriage than the going rate, which is 50%. So these are all interesting things. And it's a matter of learning about ourselves and knowing who we are and understanding why we failed and how much of that came from the background we came from and how much was that we never really understood each other before we married. These are all important things. Marriages don't have to fail, they can make it. Now, most dioceses have pre-cana, or they also have where the couples getting married have to get some at least 2 sessions of counseling. I give them more because we need much more education for marriage and especially for remarriage. Now, these may be hard things to think about, but if you treasure your life in giving yourself to another person, you want to have a happy relationship. There's nothing worse than failing a second time. It really is so discouraging. This is why a lot of people after the second marriage fails, they don't even bother with marriage, official marriage, in the third marriage or the fourth one. They just they just live together and go on like that, and that's not necessarily the right thing to do. So this is why in the reconciliation, it's so important to realize I need to heal before I can manage to move on. And you need to heal for the sake of your children because they have a lot of issues from what's happened to their parents. So reconciliation in a normal disagreement that we have with one another, it should be that one or both say, I'm sorry, I forgive you, or I accept your forgiveness, and then they can go on. And it should be that it's verbalized, that the children know mom and dad had an argument, but they forgive. What a wonderful example. It has to be something witness for their own lives. That's really Christian education in action from their parents. And sometimes it takes a little longer, and things are. People have to talk with one another and understand what happened and learn from the disagreement. And this is what a normal, healthy, real marriage is. Every marriage is going to have conflict and disagreements. People have to learn how to deal with them. And if the arguments have caused hurt because of the language or the overreaction, we have to forgive one another. And that helps the marriage to get stronger because they know more about each other because of that disagreement. And this is where their love gets stronger and their ability to be more intimate one another, not only emotionally, but also sexually. So we don't want to kind of have this idea that, oh, we don't want to have any conflicts in our marriage. That's craziness. Every marriage is going to have some conflicts, but they have to deal with them and learn from them and be able to move on and become closer with one another. Secondly, sometimes people have some real serious disagreements, arguments of overreaction, and things are pretty cool for a while. They're not talking, they're not having sexual relations. These kind of areas are important for them to work out together. And when they do forgive and accept forgiveness from the other, it takes some time before the dust settles in each one before they can be closer with one another. It just doesn't happen. And what we have to do is accept the other person as forgiven, and the other person has accepted it. They both forgive one another, but then they have to give some time for each one to heal. And sometimes the women take a little bit longer to heal than the men because the emotional aspect. This is where the husband has to be able to understand that, not take it as rejection, and not get in a frenzy about that, but to understand that women take a little longer, especially if they were hurt. And the men do too, but sometimes they don't always acknowledge it and they need to work on it because coming back together is not only a reunion, it's a restructuring. It's making the marriage even better. Then there's the third situation where the marriage is so broken down, so emotionally and sexually distant from one another. There is no peace in the family. The children are suffering. It's a destructive and dysfunctional marriage and a family. So that people come to the point where they feel they need to get some counseling. They should always have counseling before they run and get a divorce to see if there's any possibility that this marriage can be corrected and made better. And they learned a little bit about that but there's no way that they're going to be able to reconcile because of the deep hurt and the lack of trust and all the issues that probably have not been resolved over the years. So that you can say this marriage is dead. And the most important thing they need to do, even though they cannot reconcile, they should both continue with counseling and understand, how did the marriage fail? How did I fail? What have I learned about myself and changed so that if I do remarry, that I'm not going to carry the same baggage with me. And above all, I'm not going to carry with me all the hurt, anger, and disappointment. So these are the whole aspect of forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness does not always mean reconciliation, because when a couple breaks up in a marriage, there's no room for reconciliation. And they've gotten some counseling and they realize that the hurts and the disappointments and the lack of trust now makes the marriage impossible. And so this is when they are separated and to be able to go on with their lives, but they need to heal from that broken marriage. And another point that comes in here, what about the children? The children are affected by what has happened. I always advise that the children come in with either parent so that they can resolve with the children. It wasn't their fault. Mom and dad came to a bitter end, and we have to kind of still be your parents and work together. And it's not your fault that it has happened. I run into an awful lot of resistance from the children of coming into counseling because they all think that wasn't my problem, it was my parents. But the parents' problem has affected them, and they have to learn how to adjust to not having the same two parents living together anymore. So, this is understanding all of this is what is so important. The misunderstanding in these areas I'm talking to you are enormous. That people jump into a second marriage, they're not ready. How is that marriage going to make it? It isn't. And what about the children? And what I admire so much is that, especially if the mother has the children, which is the case most of the time, that she realizes for the sake of her children, she has to heal, and that doesn't carry bitterness about the father and spread that among the children. So this is why we go back to forgiveness is very important for that mother to forgive the father, so she doesn't end up with that bitterness passing it on to the children, and encouraging the children to get some counseling so that they can heal from the fact that their parents are splitting. It's a trauma for the children when this happens, even though the children want to deny. And what I say, most of them say, well, that's not my problem. That's between mom and dad. Well, that is a total denial. They need help also. I hope what I'm sharing with you today is going to be helpful for you to understand in terms of dealing with your own broken marriages or your children's broken marriages, to see the difference what can happen in that situation. So reconciliation between two people or husband and wife is a healthy thing. We can go on with our relationship. We can get a better relationship and develop a deeper intimacy. The second type of of reconciliation that can happen is that because of severe things that have happened, and maybe there's a case there of infidelity, then they have to get counseling and help one another to see if they can get through that to save the marriage and go on. And the third issue of reconciliation is the fact that there's no possibility for this couple to have a reconciliation because they have no more trust for one another and their relationship is destructive for them and also the children. I hope you can understand what I'm saying and what I'm telling you, because it's the wisdom that I have found that works for the fact of reconciliation. We can forgive and we can reconcile, and it can make us a better relationship. And if the relationship is totally broken, then we can forgive, but we don't have to go back because there is no more trust. And trust is the foundation of a healthy relationship and, above all, the marriage. Thank you for listening. And I hope you find this helpful. And God bless you and continue to understand these aspects because they can save a tremendous amount of unnecessary suffering. May Almighty God bless all of you, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.